Welcome to Smashed Avo Property. Today I'm speaking with Matt Chamberlain. He's a 25-year-old from Newcastle who's finished a business and commerce degree, worked as an auditor, and most importantly has fallen in love with property as an investment vehicle. The one thing I appreciate most about Matt is how open and honest he is about his income, his saving habits, and the long haul it took to save enough for his first investment.
I set myself a goal of every week, no matter if I was working 30 hours a week, whether I was working 10 hours a week, or whether I was actually, on holidays, I always made sure that I put at least $150 a week away into, my house deposit account. I actually called it my house deposit. And getting in that habit made me realize that, things don't happen overnight. And, across the 4 years of uni, I managed to save up about $25,000.
As always, seek your own professional financial, legal, taxation, and property investing advice for your current situation. Everything we talk about is just our opinion and general in nature and should never be considered as personal advice. So without any further ado, let's get house hunting with Matt. Matt Chamberlain, welcome to Smashed Avo Property.
Thanks, mate. It's great to be here.
Nah, mate, super keen to have a chat. You reached out on the website and got to learn a little bit of your background and your story, and sounds like a pretty interesting one. So I'm sure the guests are going to absolutely love it. So to give us a bit of a background of yourself, why don't you give you a little 30-second spiel and we'll dive in.
Yeah, sure. So I'm 25 years old now. Bought my first investment property last year, just after the election, the federal election up in Brisbane. And I've been on a property journey for, the better part of probably 6 or 7 years now. And most of that was actually the period in, putting all the cash together and building that deposit so I could actually get into that first property.
Are you based in Brizzy or did you just buy in Brizzy?
I'm actually based in Newcastle on the East Coast. So I actually went borderless for the first one, and it was definitely appealed like an interesting way to go, and probably not what most first-time investors would do. But coming from a background in accounting and being really analytical, it was just, for me, it was all in the numbers, and it just all pointed to places elsewhere than Newcastle at that point in time. So I ended up settling on Brisbane.
That's full on. It's a pretty big move, especially for your first one, like to take out that much debt, or, we'll dive into the situation, but like to take your first step in another state's a huge thing. Like even like I just diversified on my last property, and for me, it was like, it's a big step, you know what I mean? So well done. You've done really well. What convinced you to go down that route? Was it like the price point in Newcastle, or was it, a money thing? Like how did that come about?
Yeah, so it definitely was a price point thing. I was only pre-approved up to about $430,000. So that really severely limited my, I guess the markets that I could invest in. And I could have definitely found something in Newcastle, but just understanding a little bit more about the long-term property cycle, seeing what Sydney and Melbourne had done over the previous couple of years, and I think that there is a little bit of a link between, say, what happens in Sydney and then the flow-on effects of that up in Newcastle, because we're so close to Sydney. I just knew that we'd had so much growth recently in Newcastle that $430,000 was kind of get me pretty far out in the suburbs, and it just didn't stack up.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you want to always stick to that asset selection piece, right? And get the right property for that price point. But why property to begin with?
Well, we could go right back to the start. So I started my investment journey probably when I was about 17. I read the Barefoot Investor, which really got me started on the personal finance journey. And it was funny because when I turned 18, I walked into the bank to set up all of my separate accounts. And when I told the teller that I wanted to open 6 online accounts, she nearly fell off a chair because she was like, "What are you doing? What do you need all these accounts for?" But what the Barefoot Investor taught me is a lot about, paying yourself first and make sure you're putting money aside for this and for that. So that really started the finance journey. And then when I was about 20 or so, I was actually in my second year of university and picked up Rich Dad Poor Dad. And that pretty much took me right down the path of understanding how property works as an investment vehicle. And through my degree as well, and also understanding leverage and finance, I realized that property it's so much more valuable in, you know, your accumulation phase, because you're able to use leverage to help you into, you know, big assets. That it just seemed like a no-brainer for me in that, you know, I could control such a large dollar value asset with a very small amount of my own money. And from that perspective, so that was probably, you know, second year of uni, and I was actually commuting about 40 minutes each way to uni each day. And read Rich Dad Poor Dad, then realised that there was this whole world of podcasts, and fell into, you know, the Property Couch, Smart Property Investment, and a lot of other podcasts, which helped me realise that, you know, I can actually do this, and this is actually possible. And that was probably the phase from, say, 20 to 22. And then I graduated from uni, and or during that period at uni, I was working full part-time. So I actually, at one point, I had 3 jobs because I was so hell-bent on, you know, building this cash buffer to put all of my money towards a deposit for a property. So I remember that there was times where I set myself a goal of every week, no matter, you know, if I was working 30 hours a week, whether I was working 10 hours a week, or whether I was actually, you know, on holidays, I always made sure that I put at least $150 a week away into, you know, my house deposit account. I actually called it my house deposit. And getting in that habit made me realize that, you know, things don't happen overnight. And, you know, across the 4 years of uni, I managed to save up about $25,000. So it definitely wasn't enough for a deposit, but then it really helped me transition into, after I finished uni, I got into full-time work and managed to save a fair bit over the next year and a half, which brought that deposit much closer to about $50,000. And then from there, I was in a position where I could start making some serious thoughts about where I was going to place that cash.
Yeah, what a journey. And they're such fundamental books. Everyone I talk to, or pretty much everyone I talk to, has read those books, and that's where it's all started. And it almost makes me think, like, is it the books that turn the people into like financially savvy people, or is it the individual who's interested in that sort of topic and like reads the books? What do you think? It's quite interesting, eh?
Yeah, I don't know. You hit on a good point, because you're right. I feel like almost everyone I've listened to that's been on this journey has read those foundational books. But I mean, look, I think they're an interesting type of book, and they only appeal to a certain type of person. So
yeah,
I think the person would find the book rather than the book, you know, help the person.
Find the person. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And yeah, I'm all for those podcasts, the Property Couch and Smart Property Investment, and there's a ton out there at the moment. So I love it, and that's kind of what, you know, hooks me into all this sort of stuff, is just having that conversation and listening in on other people's conversations with that experience. So that's really cool. And I think the cool thing about your story is, like, even though you say it's not enough, or it wasn't a lot of money, like 150 a week, you know, it's more the habit and the fundamentals to know that you have to put money away every week. And then, like, once you got that full-time job, you had the confidence and the consistency to keep putting it away week after week after week and build up that savings again. So, well done, mate. That's awesome. It was a long road and a big journey, but, you know, you really showed that you delayed gratification and put the hard yards in. So you've done really well there. So at what point did you say, okay, now is the time to buy a property? Because I think, you know, a lot of people are kind of stuck in that sort of halfway house where they've been saving and saving and saving, and they might be in a position where they got 25, or they might be in a position when they got 50. And then it's like, well, yeah, I can only borrow a certain amount. Do I get it now? Do I wait? You know, how did you sort of define that when it was time to kick off?
So I think the catalyst for me was I was listening to these podcasts which mentioned buyer's agents, and I became very familiar with the concept of a buyer's agent, which eventually I did use someone to help me buy up in Brisbane, because there was no way I was going to be able to, to travel up and understand the suburbs, let alone have confidence in where I was putting my money. So basically the catalyst was actually me logging in and making like an appointment with a buyer's agent, and that started the conversation. But that was actually 12 months before I actually bought. So I think I spoke to 3 buyer's agents, and around that time also, I learnt about what an investment savvy mortgage broker is. So I then interviewed about 4 or 5 mortgage brokers just to make sure I was, aligning myself with someone who had a bit of a bigger picture in mind. So, so that 12 months period before I actually bought, I had all these conversations, and the general conclusion was that I needed to save more. So, but it also helped me have a lot of confidence that, okay, when I get to this specific dollar amount, then we're ready to go. So it was a journey. There was definitely a lot of steps. But that first catalyst was probably me actually reaching out to someone and actually asking, what can I do? What based on my specific circumstances, what can I borrow? And, what kind of asset should I be looking at to buy? Because, at the time I was 23 or 24 and I had no clue. I was absorbing so much information, but I didn't know how to interpret that for my own circumstances. So I really needed someone to help me, synthesize all that information and turn that into a bit more of a strategy, which then a particular property fits into that strategy.
Yeah, it's almost like you're just taking an action step, right? You're making that step and then finding someone like to guide you along the journey or help push you through that decision. I think among the many things that buyer's agents do is one of the best things that they do is, actually give you that confirmation to say, yeah, this is the one. Like, yeah, we're ready to buy. It's so easy to have analysis paralysis and, take forever to find a property or don't have confidence in what you're buying or not sure what you are buying. So, it's really taking that action step. And I think you were alluding to before, but you've actually transitioned into becoming a buyer's agent yourself now. Was that always a part of the process? Because, I'm in that sort of same rhythm. Like I'm so involved in the property market and, the podcasts and the books and all that sort of stuff. And I could easily go down that buyer's agent route and enjoy my job and be confident and all that sort of stuff. But what really kicked it off for you?
Well, I think it was twofold. So I'm only very, just kind of started in this new role in a buyer's agency in Newcastle. But the first side of it was that I actually was an accountant for the better part of 2.5 years. And I worked for one of the big 4 accounting firms, PwC, and we worked incredibly hard and we did some very big hours. And the work was rewarding in that we got to work with some incredibly large businesses. So we were working, I was an auditor, so we worked inside some of the biggest businesses in Newcastle. I also seconded down to Sydney a couple of times and worked on, the Commonwealth Bank audit. So I got a very unique perception of how big business works. But I think that the journey that I was on at PwC was for me to continue to be an employee for the rest of my life. And it just really didn't align to, my values and what I wanted to achieve for my life. So I began flirting with the idea of becoming a buyer's agent. And while it has been very rewarding so far, it's also very much, the results only come as a result of your hard work. So it definitely hasn't been an easy journey, but it's something that aligns much more to what I want to do in that, if I work hard, I'll be rewarded. And if I don't work hard, then vice versa. So it's been very interesting so far.
Yeah, that's cool. I love it. And because it's your passion and what you enjoy and you're so ingrained in there, property sector and you love, like, it's what you want to do, I think you'll do so well, mate. Like, I think you'll absolutely kill it and really enjoy every day working. And as you say, you know, the harder you work, the more rewards you get. So that's really cool stuff. And I love that. And I guess this kind of ties into my next question, which is like, what is your goals for investing? And I think, you know, you've kind of tied in your goals for your life and what you want to do in, you know, your everyday life and your goals for investing. But what does, you know, sort of that end goal look like for you?
Yeah, for sure. So my now fiance and I have been talking about this for, you know, we've been having the conversation for 3 or 4 years now, and I'm really proud of kind of that we're both on the same page with this. But for me personally, it's being able to have the decision to retire, or to have the option to retire by the age of 50. And that would be with a passive income of 250 grand combined in future dollars for my partner and I and our family. So if we take inflation out of that, it's probably more like kind of 150 to 180 now in these dollars, or today's dollars. So it's something that's probably, you know, a little bit abnormal. It's probably a bit higher than the average person, but it's also something that I know that, you know, we've got time on our side, and we just need to be very, very strategic about where we place our money and what we do with it over those kind of 20 years to make sure that we achieve that goal. And, you know, I mean, as I stand now, I'm so eager to kind of continue to develop myself and, you know, continue learning. So I can't imagine that I will, you know, just close 50 and, you know, go and start traveling the world or something like that. But I just want to have that safety net, that ability to say that we don't have to be doing something that we don't enjoy, or something that doesn't fulfill us in our lives. And we want to be able to have the ability to make decisions for ourselves, and not because we need to, say, pay a bill or something like that in the future.
Yeah, that's so cool. And although you say it's a lot of money, like it is a lot of money, but you've got so much time as well. Like 50, how old are you? 25 now, so you got another 25 years to get there. And it's like and what some people do is they don't have that end goal, like they don't have that line in the sand, and they kind of like, oh yeah, well when we're earning 100K, we'll see how we're going. When we're earning 200K, we'll see how we're going. And then, you know, lifestyle creep starts to come into that. They actually start earning a good salary, and then, you know, they want to maintain that salary in retirement. So that line keeps forever increasing. What I love that you've done is actually, and you've got you and your partner on the same page, which is another massive thing that a lot of people forget to do. Is it's all well and good to sit there and listen to 100 hours of a podcast, but you know, you might have one set projected thing in your mind, and your partner might be on a completely different level. Like you might want to be funneling money into property for the next 10 years and then starting to enjoy life a little bit more, whereas your partner might decide, well, I want to go and travel for the next 10 years and enjoy my life while I'm younger. So I think that's a massive one, is definitely getting on the same level as your partner, and then defining what that actually looks like for you. And I'm gonna have a bit of a laugh with you now. You know, when you say accounting for inflation, like I'm the same sort of person. Like I've got this spreadsheet, you know, which is mapped out the next 50 years of like when I need to buy my next property, how much it's going to grow for every year, how much, you know, rental income's going to be in there, you know, including inflation. What happens if the interest rates change and the cash rate comes down, and like all these different variables. Are you the same, coming from sort of an accounting background?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got everything down to a T. I haven't probably spent enough time on the reverse engineering kind of long term, but in terms of, you know, my current property and the next steps, it's all like I've got traffic lights on an Excel page. Like I know exactly where my cash flow sits and what's going to happen this year, what's going to happen next year. So yeah, super analytical, and I think that's probably actually sometimes to my detriment, unfortunately. But when you mentioned about my partner and I being on the same page, I think there was actually one catalyst for us to be able to have these kinds of conversations, and it was actually us going to a free seminar together. And like a bit of advice for anyone that's kind of worried about, you know, misalignment between their partner's expectations. That for me, it was taking her along, convincing her to come to one of these seminars, which it ended up turning out to be, it was an okay seminar, but they were trying to sell something at the end. And they were looking for new builds, which, I personally would tend to stay away from. But the whole concept of basically she was able to learn things that I was trying to tell her, but from someone else. And she was receptive to those kinds of, or that way of learning. Whereas I felt that often she would realise that, I was probably trying to push too much of my knowledge on her when I was trying to, educate her, and then she'd kind of close the doors and would listen. So advice for anyone, maybe take your partner along to a free seminar and let them learn at their own pace.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a good way to do it. Or even if they're into podcasts or whatever it might be, whatever source they leave, they're into books, go down that avenue. But 100%, if you can get them to sort of see the reasoning behind what you want to do, it's definitely a good sell. And I love that you pointed that out again, because it's something that a lot of people forget to do, especially when kids come into play and all that sort of stuff. There's so many factors that get involved in that whole process, and as you say, like as we were saying, like you really got to plan these things out. Like even my spreadsheet includes, when are we having kids? When are we doing it? And that's probably too much, as you said. Like it's probably going to be a device at some point, but it's just the thought of like thinking about it and actually having a plan in place for it. You can't go wrong if you have a plan. So, well, you can go wrong, but you can go worse if you don't have a plan, is what I'm trying to say. And speaking about like over analyzing things and looking into things too much, I think analysis paralysis is a pretty big one that comes into play when you're looking into property as well. Like, so easy to have this big list of things that you want to tick off and try and tick all the boxes and find that perfect property. And, being the buyer's agent that you are and having the research, what are maybe some of the fundamental things that people should look out for, or things that you would look out for in a property?
Well, I think if we're talking specifically investment, for me, it's all about the numbers. It really... and I had a good conversation with the buyer's agents when I was actually going through with them. It doesn't matter what asset class it is. It doesn't matter that it's property for me. It could have been rare art. It could have been, I don't know, anything in the world. But the numbers for me had to stack up for it to be a good investment. And, fortunately, property, the numbers do stack up because of this little thing called leverage. So for me, my piece of advice would be making sure that you know all of the numbers going into a property deal, and probably getting second opinions on those numbers. So not just listening to what the sales agent is telling you that the rental appraisal is going to be, but actually calling one of their competitors and asking them to do an appraisal on the same property before you purchase it, just so that you have a bit more confidence over the numbers and the validity of those numbers. And then also knowing all of your costs that go into a deal. And then on top of that, I think that probably what I learned from my first deal was that I need to, for subsequent deals, I really need to be thinking about, well, what else can I be doing to this property to add value in the future? So for me now, I probably wouldn't look to buy another set and forget property. And that's probably more so due to, what I know and, my plans for our acceleration of our wealth in the future. But I would look to buy something that can stand alone as it is, as a property, but then also have some kind of value add in the future. So whether that's the ability to subdivide the property, or if it's ability to, renovate the kitchen in 5 years or so, which will maybe give us the ability to manufacture a little bit of equity. So I would definitely make sure that firstly the numbers stack up as the property is when you're purchasing. Also looking for something that you can kind of do in addition to the property in the future that will help you get the most out of that deal. Yeah,
I think that's pretty sound advice, and specifically, going to other sales agents and listening to their input and all that sort of stuff. And I know you're being modest, but using a buyer's agent, even though you are one, you did use one for a property in a different state. I've used one for a property in a different state, and you kind of just get someone with boots on the ground and understand the fundamentals, and they've probably got some insights that you wouldn't have, and they're talking to these sales agents every day. So, they're going to be more real with them than they would with you and in different scenarios. So, I think that's really sound advice. And speaking about your first purchase, you said that the play there was kind of a sit and hold and set and forget. But was there anything else that kind of went into it? What was the strategy when you initially bought it? Was it a capital growth play? Was it a cash flow play? What was the initial thought process behind it there?
Yeah, good question. So we'll probably start with my income at the time. I had a relatively low income working at PwC. They're kind of renowned, public accounting's renowned for not paying the best. And then they add on this sneaky little thing, which I don't believe happens across all industries, but it's renowned in accounting, where they actually quote your salary as a total remuneration package. So what that means is if you get paid $100,000 in your total remuneration package, you actually then have to subtract your super payments before you get to your base salary, which is typically what most people would get quoted on their, their salary. So if you're getting paid $100,000 in accounting, you would then take 10% off for your super or thereabouts, and your base salary would be about 90 grand, for instance. So with that being said, when I first started at PwC, I was getting paid $48,000 total remuneration. So when you take 10% off, it was closer to kind of 44,000. And then that slowly jumped up to, in 2 years, it went up to 55,000 base salary, which with the 10% super kind of came up to about $60,000 in total remuneration package. So with that in mind, and I guess with that backdrop, I was counting every penny, and I still am. I'm counting absolutely every penny, because at that kind of salary level, and what I've wanted to do with my life, I haven't been able to have so much disposable income. And then with that kind of with that experience, my focus for this property and also because of the lending environment at the time and what I could lend up to, we kind of had to focus a little bit more on cash flow than, say, someone on a higher salary. So the buyer's agents that I actually went with follow a strategy where we look to buy a property that has the ability to add a dual income, so a granny flat out the back. And that's effectively what we did. So I purchased in northern Brisbane in the Moreton Bay regional council area in Brisbane, and I got a 607 metre squared block. So minimum requirements up there are 600 squares for you to put a secondary dwelling on the property. So with the help of the buyer's agent, we made sure that we had the ability to put a second dwelling on the property, and that was going to be the play. So I purchased that property for $370,000, and it was appraised at $380 to $400 a week in rent. So it was a very healthy cash flow play to start with. But again, this is a mistake I made, is I only relied on the appraisal that that one agency was giving me. And what eventually happened, as I'll explain in a sec, is I only managed to get $350 a week rent for that. So case point, make sure you get a couple of opinions so that that your numbers in your spreadsheets are actually stacking up. But a partial reason for the reduced cash flow is because, again, I was told by my broker in Newcastle, who I had a face-to-face relationship with, that effectively we could get finance for the secondary dwelling straight away based on my income and expenses and et cetera, et cetera. So what I did is on day one, as soon as we got the keys, I got the granny flat provider to go in and do some site work. So we removed a couple of trees, and they actually put a fence up between the back, or to segregate the property. So essentially it turned it into a battle-axed property. Yeah. So we had a side access down one side of the house, space out of the backyard for the granny flat. And then it had effectively cut off the backyard of the main dwelling. And then, 2-3 weeks went by and my broker came back and said, the bank's disallowed your construction loan, which gave me a hell of a lot of frustration because he had given me the certainty that we could go ahead with that from day one. So another mistake there was probably that my broker was actually very against the use of a buyer's agent. I didn't realize that when I brought him on. And my buyer's agents were very interested to ensure that, we were all on the same page. We were all one team and we were working to the same goal. So effectively there was a bit of an issue with communication. My broker was telling me that finance would go ahead. The buyer's agent was saying, look, it could go ahead, but you might need to put more cash in. Anyway, when push came to shove, the finance fell over. I'd built a fence in the backyard. I'd completely segregated the backyard from the main dwelling, and effectively that caused me to only be able to get $350 a week rent on the property instead of $380, $390. And it still is at this point in time. It's still completely battle axed. So there is space in the backyard which is relatively inaccessible by the current tenants, which is very unfortunate. And given our circumstances, my partners and my circumstances, we haven't been able to reapply for finance for the secondary dwelling just yet.
Yeah, far out. That's a story and a half. That's pretty full on. And I love that you're like happy to talk about it and bring it up, because it's, things can go wrong, and you might get promises from someone and feel like you can achieve certain things, but when push comes to shove and things come through, and especially when we're going through circumstances like we are today with coronavirus and circumstances can change in an instant. You just got to be aware of it. And thank God it's not like too much of a big setback. Like it's not a big problem, and you can still put, a granny flat on there in the end. But how would you, I guess this is good because it answers the question of mistakes, but how would you deal with it again? Like how would you stay on top of it again? Just having that communication between all the parties and making sure the A team's on track.
I think a couple of red flags for me was that the buyer's agents were totally transparent with me, and they said typically granny flats don't value, to the dollar. So the cost of the granny flat build, including site costs, was $122,000. And typically what would happen in their experience of doing a fair few of these dual occupancy properties is the bank would only value the completed site, and therefore the finance that they're willing to lend on that site, at about 70% of the granny flat, 70 to 80% of the granny flat cost. So in my case, I was applying for a 90% construction loan on this granny flat of $120,000. The buyer's agents were saying it'd be great if you can get that, but be cautious because it wouldn't be a surprise to us if the valuation on the completed project would come in a little bit less than the purchase price of the property, 370 grand plus my construction costs of the granny flat. My broker, on the other hand, was saying from a finance perspective, no worries at all. Like, you can get it. So I think there was a bit of a misalignment. He was probably referring to my borrowing capacity as opposed to the valuation on the property. And the buyer's agents were speaking more about the valuation and the overall effects of the finance on the deal. So to answer your question, the mistake was probably not making sure that everyone was aligned and on the same page. And I need to take fault for that, because even though my broker didn't want to speak to the buyer's agents, I probably should have realised a little bit earlier and understood that broker might not necessarily have had or have been the right broker for me and what I wanted to achieve with my goals. And as a result, I dare say I probably won't use him again for my second property.
Oh, that's a good thing. It's a good thing to understand that it's okay to choose another mortgage broker. It's okay. Like my first two properties, I used the same mortgage broker. Didn't even think about moving to someone else. And when it came to the third, he just kept, saying, no, you can't get finance. And after hearing that too many times and hearing too many other stories of people being able to get finance a lot easier, then, I thought, may as well try and find a different mortgage broker, and just the options that they relay back to you and the difference in variances and their different opinions. And, I've got a really great mortgage broker at the moment, and he, he gives you a whole scenario. He writes down all the scenarios that you could go through, which properties you can refinance, how much equity you can pull out. We can go with ABC Bank, and it was just, my mind was blown when you actually find a good investment savvy mortgage broker. The amount of work that they put in to actually help you achieve your goals is phenomenal compared to just a typical mortgage broker who's after getting, a paycheck from the bank for themselves. So I think that's a really good point, is it's okay to go and find someone else. It's okay to not stick with the same person forever. And I think that's a big, that's my catalyst, I think, is having too much faith and confidence in one individual and not sort of seeing what my options are out there. So that's a huge one. And a part of, I think, a good risk management strategy is definitely having that second income source on the property. But is there anything else that you're doing as a risk management sort of thing? Are you keeping your buckets full in the banks, or like how does it look for you?
Yeah, so it definitely ensure, like, kind of sticking to the Barefoot Investor concept, where you're divvying up your money essentially as soon as you get paid. And you're paying yourself first, into your savings buckets before you're allocating, your costs to weekend spending or whatever it is. However, it's been a little bit difficult over the last month or two because of the transition out of structured full-time work and consistent salaries. It's now moving to a little bit more volatile income coming in. So I think that strategy, just purely for me and my circumstances, will probably have to be put on hold a little bit, just until we get a bit more of a regular income coming in. But yeah, I mean, those philosophies that I learned from the Barefoot Investor and then Rich Dad Poor Dad have literally been the foundation of where I'm at today. And I mean, if we're talking kind of the future, we're both, my partner and I, are now looking to, we've got a relatively decent cash deposit for our PPR, which is our next step. So we'd like to do the PPR hopefully within the next kind of 6 months or so. And then throughout that period also make sure that we finance the granny flat, so that essentially that property for us will then be positively geared to the tune of around $10,000 per annum, which is, will be very, very nice to know that we've got that cash buffer, so that that can support us through, for instance, maternity leave and that kind of thing, going forward into the next chapter of our life.
Yeah, that's awesome. You've definitely got your plan down packed, and I love that you got your strategy for your principal place of residence, and that's the next one. That's really cool. And to be able to secure finance for the granny flat at the same time is an awesome achievement. So sounds like you got everything pretty down packed, mate. You're doing pretty well. So what motivates you? Like, what motivates you to be financially free? What gets you up in the morning? What excites you? What drives you to do all of this?
I think it's choices and it's lifestyle. It's not, to drive the fancy car or have the huge house, but it's just to be able to do what I want to do on my terms, essentially. And I think that was probably a catalyst for me changing careers, because as an employee, I felt so restricted in, I had to rock up to work at a certain time, and I had to work until a certain time, and I had to, reach certain productivity levels and all that kind of stuff, which made me feel like I didn't have control over my life. So the whole reason for doing pretty much anything at the moment for me, whether that's lifestyle decisions or finance, it all comes back to this central idea that, we're both working towards something which will allow us to have choices in the future to essentially be able to drive, the kind of life that we want to live, as opposed to the life that someone else is allowing us to live.
Yeah, that's so good. That's super important. And as you say, it's a little bit volatile when you start off, so switching from a salary to earning commission, but man, it's you just got to bite the bullet. And once you get a good solid foundation and have some really great clients, I'm sure you'll be absolutely killing it, mate. And when you are, I'm very excited to have you back on. And actually, when you buy your next property, let's get you back on and we'll have a chat and walk through it. You've been super insightful today, and given us given the listeners plenty to think about and checks to go through and mistakes to avoid. So you're killing it, mate. But if there is any sort of final advice that you would give the younger generation, what would it be?
I was thinking about this before the podcast. It would be to set a plan in place and then follow that plan, because for me, the plan in buying the first property, I think I didn't have all of these things aligned for me to be able to just, waltz into my first property. I had to do a lot of groundwork and save across what was effectively 6 years of savings to get to that first hurdle and into that first property. That didn't happen without a plan and an idea of where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. So, look, if anyone's thinking about kind of getting into their first property soon, but they don't know how, my one piece of advice would be to write down how much you need as a deposit, rough idea, and then just work backwards from that and go, okay, how much am I earning? How much can I save each week? And then really, really try to hone in on this idea that you need to pay yourself first before you start using your money to live and enjoy your life.
Yeah, that's super sound advice, mate. I think it's absolutely fundamental just to put your money away consistently over time. It's the biggest thing. And as you said, most people can walk into a situation and think, all right, well, I can, or expect their deposit to come overnight. We live in a generation that's full of instant gratification. We just think we can do things. Like, why are these people buying properties? How are they able to do it? And I think your scenario and story is so inspiring. It's a 6-year process. It's a long slog. You actually got to put the hard yards in to achieve the results that you want to. So well done, mate. You've done an absolute killer job. And thanks again for coming on today and sharing your story. It's been phenomenal.
Thanks, mate. Wouldn't have it any other way.
I really appreciate Matt coming on and sharing his stories. These are the most inspirational stories to me. Young guns putting their hard yards in over multiple years to set themselves up for the rest of their lives. I'm always looking for more guests to come onto the show. If you're under 30 and have one or more investment properties, whether it's good, bad or ugly, I would love to talk to you about it. Even if you're interested into getting into the property sector, let's have a chat. The main focus is to help other soon-to-be young investors with tips and tricks along the journey. Learn from the mistakes that we have made and ignite the fire to set themselves up financially for the rest of their lives. If you're interested in sharing your story, you can go to jordandeong.com/podcast, where there's a podcast inquiry button at the top that will guide you through the next steps. If you want to see what else I'm up to, you can go to YouTube and type in Jordan de Jong, where you'll find the Smashed Avo Property podcast being hosted on YouTube and plenty of other content that I'm putting out consistently. If you're keen for more content like this, make sure you subscribe and please leave us a review with any feedback for future podcasts. And until next time, happy house hunting.